File 7.
Chapter 5. On the fourth day comes the astrologer from his crumbling old tower up the valley, where he had heard the news, I reckon. He had a private talk with us, and we told him what we could, for we were mightily in dread of him. He sat there studying a while to himself, and then he asked, "How many ducats did you say?"
1,107, sir."
Then he said, as if he were talking to himself,
"That is very singular. Yes, very strange. A curious coincidence."
Then he began to ask questions, and went over the whole ground from the beginning, we answering. By and by he said,
1,106 ducats. That's a large sum."
7, said Seppi, correcting him.
"Oh, 7, was it? Of course a ducat more or less isn't of consequence, but you said 1,106 before."
It would not have been safe for us to say that he was mistaken, but we knew he was. Nicolaus said, "We ask pardon for the mistake, but we meant to say 7.
"Oh, it's no matter, lad. It was merely that I noticed the discrepancy. It is several days, and you cannot be expected to remember precisely. One is apt to be inexact when there is no particular circumstance to impress the Count upon the memory."
"But there was one, sir," said Seppi eagerly.
"What was it, my son?"
asked the astrologer, indifferently.
"First of all, we counted the pile of coins, each in turn, and all made it the same, 1,106. But I slipped one out for fun when the count began, and now I slipped it back and said, 'I think there's a mistake. There are 1,107. Let us count again.' We did, and of course I was right. They were astonished. Then I told them how it came about."
The astrologer asked us if this were so, and we said it was.
"Well, that settles it," he said. "I know the thief now. Lads, this money was stolen."
Then he went away, leaving us very much troubled, and wondering what he could mean. In about an hour we found out, for by that time it was all over the village that Father Peter had been arrested for stealing a great sum of money from the astrologer. Everybody's tongue was loose and going. Many said it was not in Father Peter's character, and must be a mistake. But the others shook their heads and said misery and want could drive a suffering man to almost anything. About one detail there were no differences. All agreed that Father Peter's account of how the money came into his hands was just about unbelievable. It had such an impossible look. They said it might have come into the astrologer's hands in some such way, but into Father Peter's? Never. Our characters began to suffer now. We were Father Peter's only witnesses. How much did he probably pay us to back up his fantastic tale? People talked that kind of talk to us pretty freely and frankly, and were full of scoffings when we begged them to believe really we had only told the truth. Our parents were harder on us than anyone else. Our fathers said we were disgracing our families, and they commanded us to purge ourselves of our lie, and there was no limit to their anger when we continued to say we had spoken true. Our mothers cried over us and begged us to give back our bribe, and get back our honest names, and save our families from shame, and come out and honourably confess. and at last we were so worried and harassed that we tried to tell the whole thing, Satan and all. But no, it wouldn't come out. We were hoping and longing all the time that Satan would come and help us out of our trouble, but there was no sign of him. Within an hour after the astrologer's talk with us, Father Peter was in prison, and the money sealed up and in the hands of the officers of the law. The money was in a bag, and Solomon Isaacs said he had not touched it since he had counted it. His oath was taken that it was the same money, and that the amount was 1,107 ducats. Father Peter claimed trial by the ecclesiastical court, but our other priest, Father Adolf, said an ecclesiastical court hadn't jurisdiction over a suspended priest. The bishop upheld him. That settled it. The case would go on trial in the civil court. The court would not sit for some time to come. Wilhelm Meidling would be Father Peter's lawyer, and do the best he could, of course, but he told us privately that a weak case on his side, and all the power and prejudice on the other side, made the outlook bad. So Margaret's new happiness died a quick death. No friends came to console with her, and none were expected. An unsigned note withdrew her invitation to the party. There would be no scholars to take lessons. How could she support herself? She could remain in the house, for the mortgage was paid off, though the government, and not poor Solomon Isaacs, had the mortgage money in its grip for the present. Old Ursula, who was cook, chambermaid, housekeeper, laundress, and everything else for Father Peter, and had been Margaret's nurse in earlier years, said God would provide. But she said that from habit, for she was a good Christian. She meant to help in the providing, to make sure, if she could find a way. We boys wanted to go and see Margaret and show friendliness for her, but our parents were afraid of offending the community and wouldn't let us. The astrologer was going round inflaming everybody against Father Peter and saying he was an abandoned thief and had stolen 1,107 gold ducats from him. He said he knew he was a thief from that fact, for it was exactly the sum he had lost, and which Father Peter pretended he had found. In the afternoon of the 4th day, after the catastrophe, old Ursula appeared at our house, and asked for some washing to do, and begged my mother to keep this secret, to save Margaret's pride, who would stop this project if she found it out. Yet Margaret had not enough to eat, and was growing weak. Ursula was growing weak herself, and showed it, and she ate of the food that was offered her like a starving person, but could not be persuaded to carry any home, for Margaret would not eat charity food. She took some clothes down to the stream to wash them, but we saw from the window that handling the bat was too much for her strength, so she was called back, and a trifle of money offered her, which she was afraid to take lest Margaret should suspect. Then she took it, saying she would explain that she found it in the road. To keep it from being a lie, and damning her soul, she got me to drop it while she watched. Then she went along by there, and found it, and exclaimed with surprise and joy, and picked it up, and went her way. Like the rest of the village, she could tell everyday lies fast enough, and without taking any precautions against fire and brimstone on their account. But this was a new kind of lie, and it had a dangerous look, because she hadn't any practice in it. After a week's practice, it wouldn't have given her any trouble. It's the way we are made. I was in trouble, for how would Margaret live? Ursula could not find a coin in the road every day, perhaps not even a second one. And I was ashamed, too, for not having been near Margaret, and she so in need of friends. But that was my parents' fault, not mine, and I couldn't help it. I was walking along the path, feeling very downhearted, when a most cheery and tingling, freshening-up sensation went rippling through me, and I was too glad for any words, for I knew by that sign that Satan was by. I had noticed it before. Next moment he was alongside of me, and I was telling him all my trouble and what had been happening to Margaret and her uncle. While we were talking, we turned a curve, and saw old Ursula resting in the shade of a tree, and she had a lean, stray kitten in her lap and was petting it. I asked her where she'd got it, and she said it came out of the woods and followed her, and she said it probably hadn't any mother or any friends, and she was going to take it home and take care of it. Satan said, "I understand you're very poor. Why do you want to add another mouth to feed? Why don't you give it to some rich person?" Ursula bridled at this and said, "Perhaps you would like to have it. You must be rich with your fine clothes and quality airs." Then she sniffed and said, "Give it to the rich, the idea. The rich don't care for anybody but themselves. It's only the poor that have the feeling for the poor and help them. The poor and God. God will provide for this kitten." "What makes you think so?" Ursula's eyes snapped with anger. "Because I know it," she said. "Not a sparrow falls to the ground without his saying it." "But it falls just the same. What good is seeing it fall?" Old Ursula's jaws worked, but she could not get any word out for the moment. She was so horrified. When she got her tongue, she stormed out, "Oh, go about your business, you puppy, or I'll take a stick to you." I could not speak. I was so scared. I knew that with his notions about the human race, Satan would consider it a matter of no consequence to strike her dead, there being plenty more. But my tongue stood still. I could give her no warning. But nothing happened. Satan remained tranquil and indifferent. I suppose he could not be insulted by Ursula any more than the king could be insulted by a tumblebug. The old woman jumped to her feet when she made her remark, and did it as briskly as a young girl. It had been many years since she'd done the like of that. That was Satan's influence. He was a fresh breeze to the weak and the sick, wherever he came. His presence affected even the lean kitten, and it skipped to the ground and began to chase a leaf. This surprised Ursula, and she stood looking at the creature and nodding her head wonderingly, her anger quite forgotten. "What's come over it?" she said. "A while ago it could hardly walk." "You've not seen a kitten of that breed before," said Satan. Ursula was not proposing to be friendly with the mocking stranger, and she gave him an ungentle look and retorted, "Who asked you to come here and pester me, I'd like to know? And what do you know about what I've seen and what I haven't seen?" "You haven't seen a kitten with the hair spines on its tongue pointing to the front, have you?" "No, nor you either." "Well, examine